Today, Rick and I are going to be mainly focusing on Fuji's X100VI, but we're going to talk about a variety of small rangefinder, high-quality cameras.
Yep.
We'll give you some pros, we'll give you some cons. Is this a Leica Q alternative?
Could be.
Could be. Well, hey everyone, it's Hudson, and I got Rick LePage here in the studio with me.
Yes, with a bunch of little cameras.
We got a bunch of little cameras, and we're kind of embarking on our big workshop push for the fall this year. We got the Oregon coast, then Scotland.
Well, and the Dolomites.
And we'll be scouting in the Dolomites. It's a rough season for us.
It is really rough.
But you know, we've been shooting with this Fuji X100VI, which I waited, I don't know, 8 months or something from ordering the day it launched.
It wasn't that long.
It was
still a long time.
It felt like
Poor
forever.
Carl is still waiting for his. Although,
Yeah, well, not maybe for much longer. But we have been playing around with this. We took it to Glacier National Park with us. I've been shooting a bunch with my family. We'll show you some images from this, and we'll talk through some of the pros and cons. You know, I think everyone knows. Well, you go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, when Fuji announced the X100VI earlier this year, you know, it's a $1,600 camera. You know, 40 megapixels?
40 megapixels.
40 megapixels.
APS-C.
And you know, there are a lot of people who, you know, we've been shooting with the Qs now for the Q2 and the Q3 for a while, and we love them. But they're expensive cameras. They're heavy beasts. You know, when I put the Q up against my old Sony RX1, it's a pretty small camera compared to the Q.
It is.
And you know, so the Fuji's got a whole bunch of stuff going for it. You know,
It's in between.
Right, it's in between. It's priced much more affordably. It's got a lovely lens and sensor.
Really nice lens sensor combination.
Yeah.
And that Fuji special sauce in the profiles.
Yeah.
They've got those film emulations that are beautiful. Astia, Velvia, Provia, the black and white emulations are gorgeous.
Yeah. So, you know, that's the question, right? You know, I mean, I've had people ask me, you know, on workshops, you know, shooting with the Q2, and they're like, well, is it really worth you know, what it is, and what about the Fuji? And, you know, and you know, there's a lot to love about the Fuji. There really is a lot to love about it.
I have a few nitpicks with it.
Yeah.
But we can look at some images too.
Yeah.
You know, actually, let me jump in here really quick. And I've got some images both from the Leica Q3 that I've been shooting with for the last couple of years and the Fuji X100VI. And I'll just show you one of the reasons I've kind of fallen in love with having that small rangefinder with me. It's these moments like here in Glasgow, where we'll be back soon, and you're just walking the streets and suddenly a scene just pops out, and having that little camera with you as you're off to the pub for a pint, you know? It's just being able to capture those moments with something simple, small, unobtrusive, doesn't bother people. You know, you're out with your friends and their kids at the beach. This is one of my kids' friends, Axel. He's starting kindergarten this week. And the quality that I get out of that sensor and lens combination and just the image quality is astounding.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, you know, I've loved shooting with small cameras for years. I mean, I actually bought a Micro Four Thirds camera in the late aughts. You know, the GX1, I think, or maybe the GX3. You know, I had two lenses with it, a pancake lens and a Leica Panasonic 45 millimeter macro.
Right.
And it was just, that camera was with me everywhere. And then when Sony announced the RX1 in 2012, I was like, oh my God, this is what I want.
Full frame,
full
beautiful.
frame. But you know, the thing is,
35 millimeter equivalent.
Exactly.
Or 35 millimeter,
yeah. But the thing is that it's like Sony and Zeiss worked together on the lens sensor combination, and that's what Leica did. You know, with the Q series, right? You know, it's like that sensor and lens are tuned.
They're made to go together.
I mean, you have to have great glass with that.
Yeah.
You know, and that's one of the things where I think Fuji did pretty well with this.
Yeah. Oh, I think 100%. We'll show that in just a second. But these, you know, these images that I've had with my Q3, you know, here on the workshop in Charleston, you know, Rick in the pub grabbing a burger, or, just being out at sunrise and look at the way it handles those backlit
Yeah.
situations and the dynamic range and the image quality is just astounding from such a small. And I reach for it frequently in the landscape. Here we are at the Old Manor store on the Isle of Skye, or out, at the lower Park Avenue in Moab for dawn. It's just, so frequently 28 millimeters seems to be right to me, and the image quality that I get out of it is just ludicrous.
Yeah, it is stunning.
It is stunning. So, the X100 arrives. The first thing I always do is photograph my cat, Stacy reading in the background there, and take a look at how it's rendering the world at 40 megapixels in a low lit sort of scene. We take a look at our info here, 1250 ISO. I haven't touched this image.
Yep.
Pretty darn sweet. The film emulations. This is black and white, and one of the things we're going to get to pros and cons about this camera is something that Leica doesn't do with the Qs is they embed the profile information in the raw file, so that if you set Lightroom settings to read the camera's profile, your raw files come in looking just like the JPEGs. You don't need to shoot JPEGs to get that beautiful filmic look.
Their film profiles
are gorgeous.
They are gorgeous.
I shot Provia in the landscape at Glacier, and look at that sunset shot, or here's Fred sitting out by Swift Current Falls. This is a handheld pano with it out at Swift Current Lake at Many Glacier, and just the image quality of this thing is fabulous.
Yeah.
Wonderful. It's a hazy day. This one's the only one that's really edited because I had to assemble the pano and kind of push the haze a little bit with some masking. Low light, shadows, great. I basically have not touched these images. Some shots from Glacier, and also sticking it in my pack and taking it mountain biking with my kids. It's in my little bike pack. It's small. I whip it out, use the tracking feature. It did great, getting them nice and sharp, and you can crop. Here's a shot where I'm quite a ways away. This is about as much air as Pike's got, and he's like, "Did I get air, Dad?" I'm like, you did. Oh, wait, I thought I threw a crop. Well, you know what? I'll crop it for you. I'll just hit the R key to shortcut to crop, and we'll come down a little bit here, and you can see, still looking great.
Yep.
It's not the 60 megapixels of the Leica, but 40 is pretty good.
40 is great for most of us.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think from an image quality lens perspective, this thing gets you beautiful photos in a small package, a little smaller than the Leica, even if you take the Leica's hood off.
Yeah. It feels good in the hand, especially with the grip. You put a grip on it.
Smaller grip is really nice on it.
But it feels hefty. It's well made. I mean, it really is well made. If you look at this camera and you're like, I want to shoot with this. And for me, the hardest part was holding this in my hand, going, I want to shoot with it, and hitting the power on button. And I shot with this quite a bit in Glacier. And one of the things that just really struck me was this is a very complicated camera.
It is.
It's a very complicated camera.
Well, and if you're a longtime Fuji shooter, if you're you probably don't need to be watching our video.
Right. Yeah.
But it's going to make more sense to you. But the Fuji menu structure, system, and control layout is very alien. I had a Fuji X100 S.
Right. Yep.
Back in the day, and I really liked that camera. I feel like it was a little simpler.
It was simpler. I had one as well. I think I had the T.
And this has so many menus and sub-menus, and they're not oriented in a way that makes sense to me as a Nikon shooter. They're they take a lot of time to delve into and figure out where things are and how to customize them.
Yeah. Nor I as a Sony shooter.
Right.
It's the same thing. I mean, this camera feels to me like it would take me quite a while to master it. And if I were out in the field shooting with my Sony and then pulled that out, I would have to exercise a lot of muscle memory to try and find those things that I needed to do.
100%.
Which I never was like that with the Leica.
No.
And the RX1, this was actually the first Sony camera I ever used. But this camera's a decade old now. It's still got the old Sony menus. It's slow. But when I was in Havana,
Cuba,
this was all I shot with.
I'm gonna link a video that we show some of Rick's shots from Cuba. Right there, you click on that, and I'll link it in this video's description. We've also got links to the cameras that we're talking about and accessories for those cameras in this video's full description. But Rick did magnificent work with this little camera when we were in Havana.
Yeah.
And I was shooting with the Q2 at that time.
Yep.
Yeah, and having the little camera on the street was wonderful.
It is wonderful, you know, and I think for a lot of people, this camera is a very nice alternative.
Oh, and it's significant. You can buy 4 of them.
Right.
Yeah, you could buy 4 of them for a Q3.
Yeah.
3 of them for a Q2 on the used market.
Yeah.
And it is going to take you a little time to wrap your head around some of the menu structure and setup and control layout, particularly if you're coming from another camera brand. That's the one thing I would really say is my biggest con about the X100VI is it took me quite a while to get feeling comfortable with. I'm used to picking up a camera, and with as much photography as I do and as many camera reviews, you know, I picked up the Canon R5 and was having a blast with it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I pick up a Sony camera and I'm having a blast with it pretty quickly. This camera, it was a few days and I was still saying, Rick, I spent a whole day trying to figure out auto ISO, and then eventually this is one of the big cons we'll talk about with the camera, but I eventually realized I just can't use auto ISO in the way that they've implemented it with this camera. I thought I would keep this camera and do a user setup guide, but I think you're much better served looking for someone's user setup guide that's a dedicated Fuji X100 shooter, because I'm just not going to take the time to master. I had a good time with it.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to pass it on to our friend Carl.
Yes, I think Carl will be happy with it.
And I have a little list of pros and cons. My biggest pro for this camera is, you know, the price for the image quality and lens combination. It does beautiful, beautiful images, and those film emulations are gorgeous. I've long loved what Fuji does with its film. You know, you choose to shoot in Provia or Astia or their black and white, and you can choose to apply different black and white color filters. You know, the way that it's using white balance through its color creation of the black and white files, and they just come out gorgeous. You barely need to touch them in post-production. And the fact that those transfer through to in the raw file is wonderful. Its price, its size, those are all the pros. The cons are the complexities. And the fact that it doesn't have programmable user settings built into the body. You can save your setup in the app on your smartphone or tablet. You can connect the camera. That smartphone app is great, and you know it'll do all the things you're used to with a good high quality app. I think it's the Fuji X app. But one of the things it can do is save multiple different profile setups. But let's say you're out in the street and suddenly you want to switch from your sort of portrait setup to your action setup. Well, getting your phone out, connecting your cam, switching, finding the tab it's a little. I'd rather have a menu structure save your user profile. I feel like Leica does the best job of that of anybody out there. It's just such a nice, simple way. Sony's very good too.
Yeah. I will say one other con about this camera is similar to the Qs, getting one.
Yeah, it's a long wait. We'll give you a link to this in the video's description, and we appreciate you using it, but don't blame us if it takes a while. Carl talked to us about it in Glacier and said, well, if you're not going to keep it, I've been waiting a long time. So the other big con about this camera, and if you do get one, I'm just gonna talk you through it real quick, is that it's auto ISO. It's auto ISO. Only you can set it in ISO, and they have 3 different ones. You actually have 3 different programs, A, B, and C, oddly enough, where you can set different maximum ISOs, all that kind of stuff, different shutter speed formulas. But if you don't have auto exposure lock, if you're a back button focuser and you decide, well, I'm going to take auto exposure lock and autofocus off the shutter button, good luck, because what happens is it only activates auto ISO when the shutter's half pressed and it engages auto exposure lock. That's when it calculates what ISO am I going to shoot at. So as you're scanning through the scene, you'd think you'd be metering and seeing what different ISOs the camera might be choosing. No, you have to hold the button down halfway, and out of the box, that locks focus and auto exposure, and it tells you what ISO the camera's chosen. if you take that off the shutter, it will just always shoot at the maximum ISO that you have set possible in your ISO setting. So if you set it at 3200, every frame you take is going to be 3200. So you have to put auto exposure lock back on the shutter button, and then you don't get to preview what the ISO is going to be until you've half pressed the shutter. That just doesn't work for me. So what I wound up doing was reprogramming the command dials and often shooting in auto shutter speed mode and controlling aperture on the lens. So I'm shooting an aperture priority essentially, and I put ISO on the front ring, and so that it's that way as I spin that front ring, I'm watching what the ISO is doing with the shutter speed. I'm changing shutter speed via ISO, essentially.
It doesn't work the way we're used to with our cameras.
No.
It really does not.
It's not a Nikon, Sony, Canon kind of methodology. And you know, I mean, it works once you get used to that. I'm watching my shutter speed via dialing ISO, and it has a really nice exposure compensation dial up on top. And it works. I also don't like the shutter feel.
Yes, the shutter field was kind of, I mean, it's soft,
a
little squishy.
It's improved by putting one of these little, you know, thread-in shutter button extensions, which I like on my Leica and I like on my Nikon ZF. And I have I'll link those with the accessories for this camera. I have a 3-pack that comes gold, silver, and black for like $14 or something on Amazon. It's very affordable. But it does improve the feel, but it still just doesn't have that precision shutter feel that I'd like.
And I think that's this camera, because I asked someone about this with the, you know, do they have the XT series? And they said no, they don't have any issues with it at all. So I think it's just something in the X100.
And I don't remember it in my X100S either.
No, that was a fun camera to shoot with. But I do think, you know, as you said earlier, that was a simpler camera.
It was.
It really was a simpler camera. You know.
So, you know, for me, whenever I was using this, I sort of longed to be shooting with my Q, but you know, not everybody's going to be buying a Q.
Right.
So that's not an entirely fair.
Yes.
I'm spoiled.
I agree with that. I mean, you know, people are really not. Yeah. It's not the Q is an investment that you make because you want to go out there with this other camera all the time, you know?
It's rare I don't have this camera with me.
Yeah.
And I will say that in Leica's praise Leica, their user interface on this series of cameras is bar none my favorite of anything I've ever used. I just love how simple. It took me no time at all to be creating great images with this camera when it arrived at my house.
There's something about the Leica UI, and I actually saw Tom Hogan had a thing the other day where he was talking about Leica, and he said, you know, the Leica UI is not for me, but you know, he said I can understand how it is for a lot of other people. You know, and I think, you know, that's all of the cameras are like that, right?
100%.
You know,
nobody's perfect.
Right. Well, speaking of nobody's perfect.
Yeah, you want to bash Leica a little bit? Well, we're not bashing.
No, I'm not going to bash
them.
it. So, you know, this other camera that was announced not long after Fuji announced it was the Leica D-Lux 8, right? Which is it's a point-and-shoot camera.
It really is.
It's got a micro four thirds sensor, so it's smaller than what much smaller than what you get even in the Fuji film.
17 megapixels.
Yeah, 17 megapixels. You know, it's got the Leica feel to it and the Leica look to it. You know, I mean, the dot, you know, when I picked this camera up for the first time, it felt very comfortable because.
Well, you've been shooting with a Q.
Yeah, you know, it's got some things that you really like about it, and then there's some things that are just, you know. The lens, it's 24 to 70. It's a nice focal length. You know, there's a power zoom, which I just hate. You know, when you're just sort of like using a toggle.
Yeah, I wish they'd just put it on the barrel. Yeah.
You know, but if you've seen the Q interface, it's very similar.
Oh, it's basically skinned down a little bit.
Right. So, you know, this is another one where a lot of people were like, oh, well, they came out with a small camera, you know, looks like Leica, so maybe I should think about that. You know,
and it's within dollars.
Yeah, it's like
$4 cheaper than
Yeah.
than the X100VI.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And so that's where it kind of falls down, you know, and you know,
image quality.
image quality is good for what it is.
Yeah.
You know, this feels like it's aimed at the phone shooter who
Wants a little bit more.
wants a little bit more. You know, the problem is I think that the good phone shooters are good phone shooters and they just want to stay phone shooters. It's still going to feel more complicated. You
Yeah,
know?
and yet it doesn't have the range to grow with
Yeah,
that a camera like this does.
exactly.
And it has nowhere near the croppability and the
No.
low light performance and everything else associated with
Right.
this camera. The X100VI has a wonderful lens sensor combo.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
they've
and
done great.
This is, so the history of this camera, this is the D-Lux 8. There was a D-Lux 7, and Panasonic had a camera using basically the same sensor, lens, and size that was sold for much cheaper. It was like, I think, $1,100 or $1,000, which feels a little bit more like the right price for a point-and-shoot camera that's, 17 megapixels.
Agreed.
You get some really good things. I mean, it's got a great macro capability.
Show
So,
some of
yeah,
your
that's it,
images. Yeah.
So, I was out on the coast recently and I was shooting with my friend Charlie, and I mean, it does a really good job. The black and white is not as good as the Q, but it's serviceable. I mean, you can get nice portraits with it. But I said the macro capability is nuts. I mean, it's like a little bit over an inch at its widest aperture. It does a good job.
Or widest focal range.
Widest focal range, yes.
Beautiful.
It's a nice lens to shoot with. It's a really nice lens to shoot with. And I just, it's funny because it made me think about the RX1, which I don't take out much anymore since I got the Q2, but I don't want to get rid of it. I love the 35 millimeter focal length. I love the size, and even though it's slow, it eats batteries. It's a nice camera, and it's very similar in size.
Really similar in size.
But this camera is, I mean, this is not a Q alternative. It's not a X100 alternative. It's a hard camera to love.
It's a hard. I'm sure that there are users out there that do. They want something a little more than a cell phone, and they want the Leica brand.
Well, yes, and so, if you have a familiarity with, sort of basic camera functions with the cameras that we're using, this camera is a really easy camera to get up to speed with.
Oh, it is 100% simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got Leica's user modes. It used the Photos app, which is great. I mean, it's a really nice app. It's not a bad camera.
No.
I just feel like it's not priced where it should be.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
I mean, the previous camera, the D-Lux 7, I mean, I think it came out 5 years ago. And Panasonic has not updated that model. But they're basically the same sensor, the same lens, the same body design. Leica added USB-C charging with this, the Photos app, stuff like that.
Right.
But, it's hard when you look at something like this, or even an older camera like this, to think that this would really do what you want it to do.
And command the same price.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Leica's like that a little bit. There's a lot of people who look at these cameras and say, well, how the heck can they be that expensive?
Yeah.
But then Leica's glass for their M
Right.
system, which this is an equivalent to.
Was it you who told me, or was it our friend Duncan who said it was basically you were buying a
You're buying a 28 millimeter Similux, and you're getting a free camera with it.
Exactly.
I mean, and that has been sort of proven by the fact that from the Q1 to the Q2 to the Q3, they've bumped up to 60 megapixels, and this lens has no problem with that resolution at any aperture, at any point in the frame.
Yep.
So,
and I tell people that your world will change when you are just shooting with a single focal length lens.
Yeah.
With a great sensor.
Yeah.
I mean, it really will change.
And I love shooting my Nikon ZF with that Voigtlander 51.0.
Yeah.
It's a special
Right.
lens with a tremendous amount of character and its own kind of individual style and everything. I have to think differently, and it stretches me as a photographer in good ways.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think getting something like this, and the Fuji is a great way to get in if you can get one.
Yeah, if you can get one, and if you want to dedicate some time to really delving in and figuring it out. And if you do, come back to that discussion of mine on auto ISO, because it might flummox you out of the box.
Yeah, but you can get around it.
You can.
You get around it. You just have to change your shooting style a little bit.
A little bit.
You know.
All right. Well, so we're going to be sending this guy back.
Yep.
We're going to be giving this guy to Carl.
Yep.
We're going to keep shooting with our Qs.
We are going to keep shooting with the Qs.
And you're not going to get rid of your little Sony.
I'm not going to get rid of my Sony.
Because why should you?
Yeah, it's a beautiful camera.
It's kind of like me. I'm probably going to keep the ZF forever, even after it's long eclipsed by other cameras. All right, everybody. Well, so we have one more office hours before we're off to Europe. The 17th.
General Q&A.
General Q&A. Sign up for that. You can click right here or go in this video's description to see all the links I've been talking about, including that. Leave us a question.
Yep.
And then we're going to be gallivanting all over Europe for a while. I'm even going to Switzerland for a little bit to meet up with my Evo friends on the get. So there's lots happening.
Yep.
And then we'll be back, heads down, getting ready for next year.
Yep.
So I hope everybody out there is having fun, staying safe, staying creative. If you have any questions about this or anything else, hit us up in the comments, email us. We're always happy to talk about all. You got any workshop news before we sign off completely?
Well, we should be getting the Rainier and Oregon Coast workshops for next year up very soon.
Okay.
And we'll probably post the Scotland workshops for 25 after we get back from Scotland.
Perfect. Yeah. Cool. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. Stay creative, stay safe. We'll see you next week.